I've already defined what a network engineer does, right? And we're gonna break down. I've broken down the definitions already, right? And we're gonna talk about the career path of a network engineer. We're gonna talk about the scaling of the network engineer role, right? And we're gonna talk about something I call job scheduling and windows, and how knowledge is gained, and some good skills to have of a network engineer. Okay, cool. Stay tuned and let's enjoy the show. In the career path of a network engineer, um, it just depends on the company. Different companies have different roles, different hierarchies and organizations and stuff like that, right? So a small company could have just one or two engineers that does everything with installing of their small network. But when the network grows larger and larger and larger in scale, right, then you will need a lot more engineers in the picture to ensure that everything goes smoothly, right? Basically, talking about the career path of a network engineer, it just depends on the scale of the company. So sometimes you can have large scale companies, right? Like internet service providers, they have a massive network, right? A large network. You cannot just have one engineer doing everything. No. So in that case, there's what they call division of labor. The different departments, different teams, maybe a network engineer that's responsible for firewalls, another team responsible for Metro Ethernet, another team responsible for the NOC, Network Operations Center, for the Metro Ethernet environment, right? You can have things like another team for IT. So basically, there's different subdivisions, right, to cater for the large scale of the network. But when you're talking about a small network, like a Starbucks, for example, right? It's a small network, so you really don't need a lot of network engineers there, right? Maybe just one network engineer per location, basically, also or network analyst per location. Okay, cool. So looking at my screen, you can see I try to put like a hierarchy to show you like different hierarchies of engineers, network engineers. So day one, if you're just out of college or out of school or out of your first certification like a CCNA, you could start off as a engineer one, right? And with time, you can grow to an engineer two, maybe after you've had like a lot experience, maybe 1 year experience or 2 year experience, and your manager is like happy with you, you could grow to an engineer two. Then from there on, you can grow again to an engineer three. At engineer three level, you're very, 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 very sharp engineer. You're very, very proficient. The company trusts you and stuff like that. They make you an engineer three. And later on in your career, you can become a senior engineer as well, right? Now, at the senior engineer level, you're like pretty awesome. You're like a network ninja, right? And a lot of people put a lot of trust in you, right? Then from being a network engineer, some people can be a senior network engineer throughout the life of their career because that's a very, very reputable position as well. But if you want to go into architecture, designing and stuff like that, laying down standards and principles for the company for other junior network engineers to follow, then you can grow into being an architect. Now, the architect role is a very, very knowledgeable role, right? It's for like a lot of people that have had years of experience. They're very, very technically savvy. They understand the end goal, the end-to-end mapping of the network, right? So you could be an architect and you're designing stuff. And some companies have what they call architect engineer. So it's just like another hierarchy. After a senior engineer, then you have an architect, right? Then after being an architect, you can also become a senior architect, right? So the senior architect is like the highest hierarchy, right? In most organizations, right? Basically in the technical field. So, and that's the technical path. Technical. There's also a managerial path as well. And for the managerial path, most times they could start off as being an engineer, right? And they get to a senior engineer and they get promoted to a manager. Now, the manager now manages a team of engineers, right? And from then on, in the managerial path, the manager can grow from being a manager to maybe a senior manager or a director, from a director to vice president, maybe an assistant vice president, then a vice president, then a senior vice president, then an EVP, and then possibly a CTO. But you see, the managerial path has a lot more hops after vice president, right? The technical path, in most companies, the highest is senior architect. But they still grow in salary and stuff like that, right? But basically, you see that there's a large career path for being a network engineer. It's a very, very rewarding field, and it's awesome. It's great. I'm a senior network architect. The job of a network engineer is very interesting. It's also very tasking too, right? It's also rewarding as well. But like, how is knowledge gained? How do network engineers gain knowledge? It just depends on your learning style. For example, I have another video where I'll be talking about knowledge and how to gain knowledge, how to become a good engineer. That'll be my next video, but I want to talk about it briefly. So people are different, right? People learn differently. So some people could learn from experience, job experience, right? But this is kind of like the longest path, because you could start off as a day one engineer one, and you're counting on, like, gaining knowledge through experience. That is very viable. It's very possible. But maybe after like another 3 years, you can get promoted to an engineer two, an engineer three, and you grow that way. Then maybe in 10 years, you get to be a senior engineer. It happens that way. So experience is a very good way. Remember, there's a popular saying that experience is the best teacher, right? So yeah, you can definitely learn skills from colleagues, and on the job experience, and you can grow that way. Another way that people get knowledge is from studying. Studying. Now, it depends on your style of studying, right? It could be self-paced, or it could be like school. So this studying is by school. So people like go to college, right, to get a degree and stuff like that, or a community a community college, to get a degree or to get like some knowledge in becoming a network engineer. That's also a way of getting knowledge as well. And there's also trainings too. Trainings. You can undergo trainings, maybe like what they call boot camps. Boot camps. So boot camps are like fast-paced, very, very fast-paced, vendor-led trainings, that where, like, for example, if you do a boot camp for a certification, say a CCNA, right, or a CCNP or a CCIE, the vendor, for example, maybe Cisco or maybe Juniper or maybe Nokia, they cram they cram everything into like modules, right, into nuggets in 1 week, where you're in a classroom and they're gonna like put all this knowledge on you in the classroom. There'll be a teacher teaching you stuff, right? And you have 1 week, you have full access to their labs, you have full access to the teacher, you can ask any questions, and it's specifically towards helping you to pass their certifications. So that's a boot camp, but they can be very expensive, right? But some people learn from that way too. So you can see, you can gain a lot of knowledge in different ways. It just depends on how what your style is. The fastest way is the boot camp way, but it's very expensive. But it's faster because you cram everything in 1 week and you take a certification, right? And you have a higher chance in actually having access to labs and getting a lot of knowledge within that 1 week. It's very expensive, but it's a fast way of getting knowledge too. So people go that route as well. Okay, back to our hashtag. Hashtag of today, put in the work. Hashtag put in the work. Let's go. So, okay, cool. Good skills to have. A network engineer is a very, very versatile position. And normally it depends on the company and the role, right? But most recruiters looking for network engineers, in some resumes, they will put some good skills that they're looking for. For example, a network engineer should have good analytical skills, right? Because that will help the person to be able to, troubleshoot, figure out solutions to problems, analyze problems in a quick manner, right? So that's a very good skill to have. Another good skill to have is leadership and communication skills too, because most times you're working with cross-functional teams, right? You're working between teams. For example, a network engineer that is maybe just responsible for firewalls, right? Doing firewall policies and stuff like that. He could also interface with multiple teams. For example, another team, maybe a Metro Ethernet team, could put in a firewall ticket where he says, hey, and the firewall ticket says, hey, network firewall team, can you open HTTP between two destinations or between two networks, right? So that could be a ticket, and they specify the network or the destinations that they want reachability between, right? So, and normally sometimes the firewall team would reach out to the guy, to the person that opened the ticket to confirm and to ensure that he has a good understanding of what they're trying to do. So basically, you need communication skills to communicate with different parts of the network, with cross-functional teams, right? So communication is kind of like in common with people management, being able to communicate with people, communicate your what you're trying to do to people. Also, a network engineer should have good documentation skills. I showed you a video where I talked about Microsoft Visio, right? And I showed you a network diagram where I was detailing some users and some users' computers plugged into switches, right? And stuff like that. So that's a documentation skill that network engineers should have. And they should also have experience with multiple vendors, because in the business, in the field of network engineering, there's a lot of vendors. It's not just one particular vendor that rules everything. You have Cisco, right? They could make switches and routers. They could make servers. You have HP, right? Making servers, switches, routers. You have Nokia also making routers, switches. You have Juniper making switches, routers, and firewalls. So basically, there's a plethora, a lot of vendors, right, doing multiple things. So it's good to have experience with multiple vendors, and network engineers have experience because they're exposed with multiple vendors during the life cycle of their work. Now let's talk about job schedules. Okay, cool. So it depends on the company, right? So there's some companies that just have one shift, and there are other companies, larger companies that have multiple shifts, right? So it depends on the scale of the company. So it depends on scale. So some companies have a shift, and it also depends, right? It could be 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. could be the A shift, right? A shift. And some companies have like a B shift, right? Maybe from 2 p.m. to like 10 p.m. It just depends on the company. And they can have a night shift, a C shift, which could be maybe from that 10 p.m., right, to like 6 a.m., right? So you have different engineers working in these different shifts. And also some companies just have regular hours. So some engineers work from 9 to 5, 8 or 9 to 5 p.m., right? 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So it just depends on the company. But yeah, there's a concept of shift work and stuff like that. And also sometimes in the NOC, it's very common to see NOC engineers. Um, um, Normally the regular engineers would work for like 40 hours a week, right? Maybe 9 to 5, right? Sometimes in the NOC, it's very common to see them work maybe 3 times a week or 4 times a week, but they're working longer hours. For example, they could work like say get a different color. They could work like maybe 14 hours a day for 3 days, or 12 hours a day for 3 days, right? So it just depends on the company and their dynamics, basically. But there is a concept of shift work, right? For me, I've been working regular hours ever since, but working as a network engineer, you have to be open to the concept of like kind of like overtime. For example, sometimes you'll be required to work overtime. Say, if there's an outage, right, or you're working on a project and you're trying to meet up with a deadline, right? Even though you're full time and salaried, right, you could still be required to just stay in and work overtime to fix that problem. Sometimes, multiple times, I've always, opted to join the maintenance window because I enjoy networking. I love it. Everybody that's worked with me in the past knows that I'm like a nerd for network engineering, right? I love it. So basically, you would see me working my regular hours, and you would see me also working at night, trying to help out the night guys, trying to show them what to do, and trying to make sure that everything comes out successfully. So yeah, you gotta be open to the concept of just sometimes working at night during maintenance hours and things like that. Now I mentioned maintenance hours. That's very popular. It's a very, very popular term, right? So you have regular hours and you have maintenance window. So network engineers usually work, regular hours in the day and stuff like that, but they have the night guys that implement changes at night. And the idea is, you don't want to just make a change in the daytime when some bank is like working and you make a change and that causes an outage that affects the bank, right? You don't want that, right? So basically, large organizations, companies, I can tell you literally that every company, every network company, and every ISP that you know about, any of them, be it AT&T, Verizon, Frontier, any of them really, they have a maintenance window where they make changes, right? And they're doing that so that during that period, they would have notified customers and said, hey, we are going to make a change between 1 a.m. and 1:30 a.m., right? So they tell the customers we're going to make a change, and they choose those hours because those are like the low hours of the day when everyone is supposedly sleeping, right? So basically, that's the concept of maintenance windows. So the night guys, the night network engineers, they'll be online making those changes, and after they make every change, they ensure that the network is back up and operational. So basically, that's a very, very good concept, big concept in network engineering too. The ability to work and make changes during the maintenance window. There's a concept called MOPS. It's called MOPS. MOP, method of procedure. Now, network engineers are very conversant with this concept, MOPS. And what it means is it's a document, some documentation that outlines various steps, various configurations that you intend to implement in the network. So the idea is, yes, network engineers are ninjas, right? Network ninjas. They can go in on the fly and make changes and fix problems, right? But it's not really advisable because, especially if you're a junior engineer or medium or like a mid-level engineer, right? Like one could make mistakes. We're all human, right? So it's always good to document changes that you've made in the network so that we can always track it and figure out what went wrong if anything goes wrong. It's always a good idea to document stuff. And that's why I mentioned the planning function of a network engineer, right? It's really, really big. So they have what they call method of procedure, MOPS. And that's what these an engineer in the daytime will write a MOP for a specific task or function, right? Then he hands it over to the night guys. And at nighttime, during the maintenance window, the night network engineers implement that MOP. They open the MOP, the document, they see all the steps and guidelines laid down by the daytime engineer, right? And usually those documents have gone through several series of approvals, right? Of reviews and approvals before it gets to the night guy. Now, at the time the night guy gets the document, it's supposed to be a thoroughly reviewed document that has little or no mistakes. So that when the night guy implements those configurations, right? Maybe between 1 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. when everyone is sleeping during the maintenance window, it comes out successfully. So that's a very, very popular term, and that's what network engineers do also as well. This was just a brief nugget trying to explain the job functions of a network engineer. So basically, from all these things I've mentioned, all these key topics and buzzwords, basically all I'm saying is that network engineer is responsible for the day-to-day running of the network. They ensure that the network is up and running and highly available with little or no downtime. Because the goal is you want the end user, the consumer that is consuming services across the network to enjoy the services that's being consumed. That is the main goal. And that's what network engineers do. They ensure that the network is up and running with little or no downtime.